A little while ago, I asked on my Facebook group, what is something you wish more people know about the art or style that you practice? And I got a truckload of really good responses. And in the next few You Are Not Aries episodes of the podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit about those. So if you're new to the podcast, we've got the main episodes, which is me talking about a specific topic. Typically, these are long form episodes. Then we've got interviews. They go as long as we can take them. And then obviously with a bonus episode on Patreon. And then we've got the You Are Not Aries episodes, which is one that I'm doing now. So I take on topics and questions from my Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. So that said, the first response I get from David was really good. And it was that we don't always wax cars and paint fences. Now, if you're too old, you don't remember the Karate Kid movie. But, wax the car, paint the fence, and so on, paint the house, all those things, they have a very specific meaning, and if you're old enough, you get that. But that was a humorous response, so I'm gonna move on beside the jokes to what Dan said, and that is the one that I wanted to cover for today. He said, "What it feels like to get punched in the face on purpose. Sure, those boxing gloves are really padded, but it still sucks for the first few months until you get used to taking a shot." And that is a critical point. It is one of the things that I always try to address with students is that you're always simulating reality when you're training. You can never really completely get the real thing unless you're actually fighting for real, which is by default not what you do in training. One of the different variables that you are going to have a hard time systematically implementing is impact. Now, even when you spar hard, there's going to be a limit to how hard you're actually going to hit. For instance, there are very few gyms in which you will see somebody, for instance, in an MMA gym, doing a sparring session, and one guy punches the other guy in the face. The guy goes down, he's knocked out, and that then the coach and everybody else lets the guy do ground and pound on an unconscious training partner for 5 minutes straight. And it's a little bit of hyperbole, obviously, what I'm saying, but my point is that there are limits. You don't always spar hard either. You don't do sparring every single training session constantly. So even though there are limits, we want to get close to reality in certain ways. So it's always going to be exposure to a certain degree to the students or the practitioners of things that you will encounter in real life. Could be many things, could be speed, could be how fast things go, could be setups. For instance, if you're practicing self-defense, recognizing when somebody sets you up for a sucker punch or to rob you and so on. A lot of things. When it comes to getting punched in the face, for a lot of people, if they've never experienced that, it's a huge surprise. It can be a very even almost traumatizing experience for a bunch of people, simply because they've never had to deal with impact before, and they think, well, I'll be all right. But then the first time they get hit, they're like totally blown out of the water. Some people get angry. They get punched in the face and they immediately want to hit back or instinctively do so. Regardless of the reaction, what you think you'll do once you get punched in the face, what you think of yourself of this is how I will react, is not obvious that that will happen in reality. There's no certainty in that regard. So whatever you think your reaction might be, typically that's not necessarily what happens. That's the first part. Second part is that just because this is how you react the first time doesn't mean that this will be your standard reaction every single time you get punched in the face. Even the most experienced people sometimes freeze. People with a tremendous amount of real life encounters, overcoming violence, sometimes even freeze when they get attacked. So it's being open to this reality. But obviously, having that experience makes a massive difference. So there's two parts to what Dan said. The first one is what it actually feels like. For instance, typically, I always thought that getting punched in the face doesn't really hurt. You get your bell rung. You can, be you're just walking about like a zombie, shuffling almost off balance, and being cross-eyed and unable to coordinate anything, or just mount up a counter-offensive or anything. All that stuff can happen, but the impact itself, the moment itself, and I've taken my fair share of headshots, as some of you like to argue, but I'll leave it at that. But pain wasn't necessarily the main thing. The pain often came afterwards. Is if somebody hits you so hard that they break your jaw, yeah, then the pain's going to be very quickly there once the adrenaline wears off. But the shot itself, taking it, the punch to the face, you get the flash in front of your eyes. You can be dizzy, you can be, half unconscious or really go and get knocked out. But that's pain is not necessarily the issue. And that's what I find often with beginning practitioners and students, is that they think it's going to hurt and they're afraid of the pain. Whereas my point to them is that, well, it's not necessarily going to be pain. Doesn't mean that you should obviously just accept getting punched in the face and look forward to it. By far, the point of self-defense and combat sports is not to take damage, but to deal out damage while avoiding getting beaten up by your opponent. But you shouldn't let it terrorize you into inactivity. And once again, you'll only know how you react once you get punched in the face for real. And that's the key point in what Dan said. It's getting punched in the face on purpose, not by accident, not because somebody is being a little bit of a prick and doing a technique that isn't allowed, making more contact than they should. No. You're training, for instance, you're sparring, and the point is you're going to go hard and you're going to try to land shots on each other. And you're not holding back all that much, so it's going to be a fair amount of impact. When he says that boxing gloves are really padded, but it still sucks until you get used to it, that is a key part of training, is desensitizing yourself to a wide variety of factors that you need to be able to handle once violence happens for real, whether it's in combat sports or for self-defense. And impact, getting punched, taking a hit, and keeping on going is an integral part of that. Obviously, there are good and not so good ways of training for these kind of things. For instance, one of the most horrible things that I see out there, even still today, there's an old video floating around on the internet where you see just, it looks like it's either a Muay Thai, boxing, or MMA gym, where all the students are just standing there and the coach is just hitting them with gloves. And he's landing pretty solid punches just to the head, just all headshots. You don't toughen up your brain. You get brain damage that way. You don't learn how to take a shot by taking shots you shouldn't have to take. You learn that by, when it happens, when you're sparring and you take a shot, by then fighting through it in hopefully in an intelligent manner. If you spar often enough, it's going to happen. You're going to get tagged. Well, that is an opportunity to then learn how to deal with it. But on purpose, taking headshots is the stupidest thing you can do. Brain damage is not just cumulative. We thought that, but the current science has basically pointed out that it's not just a cumulative nature of taking punches to the head, but it's the fact that every single punch is one too many and does damage. So taking damage for the hell of it is always a bad idea. So that's a big part of it. The other aspect I want to mention is that as you get used to it, you will see nuances in how to perform techniques and strategies and tactics that you don't see before. In my MMA class, I often have that with beginners. They learn a basic drill, they have to do the drill, and I tell them, look, you don't get to improvise. You don't get to change the drill right now. We will do that later, but not right now, because I know what comes next. And I want you to learn specific things first before you can try to change things around a little bit and do it your own way. So we have to build a solid base first. And there's a lot of that stuff going on. For instance, yesterday in class, one of the newer students was making the mistake of always leaning back to anticipate a counterpunch as he would move in with his own jab. And I said, look, this is how you're going to get hurt, because you are leaning away from your own punch, which means that you're opening up a shot to the head for your opponent, but also you're almost guaranteeing that you will not land your punch, and if you do, it's not going to be with a lot of power, because your punch needs to go forward, you're pulling yourself backwards, both forces go in opposite directions and negate each other. As a result, your jab's not powerful, and even if it does land, it's not going to do a lot of damage, which means that in turn your opponent will be able to ignore it or parry it easily and then counter you. And then you're going to get punched in the face, the thing you wanted to avoid the most. Until you get used to those impacts, getting hit, this kind of stuff happens. Now, when you're just drilling and the partner is not allowed to do anything with that opening you present himself, because the drill is focused on something else, then it's easy to get into this situation in which you automate and ingrain doing things a certain way that only works because in training the opponent or the partner isn't allowed to punish you for it. But as soon as it's in a freer context, in sparring, then if you do make the same mistake, they will punish you for it and you will get hit hard. And all that stems from not wanting to get hit because you're not used to getting hit and you're afraid of getting punched in the face. Again, there are many ways to train to get used to impact. I do a bunch of drills in my MMA class simply to teach beginning students to not only have proper technique, but also learn to, for instance, fight in the pocket, fight close by, and understand that even though it might be scary, you can get used to it. And there's actually a fair amount of technique that can help you through fighting at that range, where you're going to get punched in the face a lot if you don't really do a good job. So that's what Dan said. I've got a bunch more really good answers from everybody on that question of like, what do you wish people would know about the style system you do? And in the coming weeks and months, I'm going to go over a lot of those because they were just really good, interesting questions and answers and takes on a variety of arts and systems that I wanted to share with you guys. That's coming up next. And in the meantime, I'm obviously always going to continue with the main episodes and interviews. I'm trying to line up some really good guests. And obviously, as always, if you still have suggestions for guests, drop me a note on Facebook. That's the easiest thing, or comment on one of the episodes on my social media when I drop an episode. That's always welcome. In the meantime, like, share, subscribe. And if you want, join me on Patreon for a lot more content. Okay, that's it, guys. Take care.